Oh, kia ora koutou katoa, and welcome to the NTS SSPP task tutorial for assessment task 6 and 7. So I'm sure that if you're joining us for the first time, you probably shouldn't be. You probably need to start at one of the other tasks. But if you're familiar with the way these work, we're going to go through task 6 and 7 today. My name is Edward, and it's great to have you tuning in again. And of course, you know this person over here. What's your name?
Good everyone, my name is Grant.
Oh, Grant.
Lovely to see you again. Not so lovely to see you again.
Check yourself. Anyway, today we'll be looking at our two assessment tasks, assessment task 6 and 7. So it's working with your Maori client and also working with your complex needs client. The reason why we're doubling up on this today is because both of them are fairly similar. Apart from the person that's going to be your case study, it's very similar, the information that we're going to be drawing as we are looking through the assessment task. There we go.
So you might have a look at these assessment tasks when you first open them and see that we need quite a lot of information. They're quite long. It's because you can see there's so many unit standards are embedded in both of these tasks. So that means a bit more evidence is required to cover all the learning outcomes of all these unit standards.
Great. So if we just check out, this is what you will be doing or what you should be able to evidence by the time you finish these tasks.
So really what we're doing here is it's you describing how you help people who are dependent on tobacco, what sort of evidence-based smoking cessation treatments you describe to them and advise them to use to help them to stop smoking, and all of the things that you would do in your everyday work when you're supporting people to stop smoking. So that's why it's a real client that you're working with. You're just telling us what you did to help that person stop smoking.
So generally we'll be tracking the first 4 weeks that you are working with somebody. So generally from the very first time you get the referral, when you make that phone call for the referral process, the documentation of the referral, how you make the appointment with your client, how you assess them for tobacco dependence, and then what sort of plan you put in place for them, right up to their 4-week CO validation time. So in that time when people sort of start, the process of their quit date, once they sort of start on their stop smoking medicines, if they had any problems, if they did have any problems, what did you do to mitigate those problems? How did you then work them through? At the end of that 4-week period, it does not matter whether your patient or client has stopped smoking, because we're not actually tracking your client, we are tracking your interactions with the client and what you did with them to keep them safe and keep them supported during that first 4-week period.
So there's, as we said right at the start, you'll need 2 clients to do this. One is a Maori client, one is a complex need client. So they need to be 2 different people. So you might find a Maori person who is pregnant, so that person fits both the criteria for task 6 and 7. They're Maori, which is needed in task 6, and they're pregnant, which is a complex needs. But for these 2 assessment tasks, they must be 2 different people. So you need a Maori client and a client with complex needs to describe their cases. If we go back, sorry, just go back one, Edward. If you work for a stop smoking service that doesn't work with Maori, say you might be in a Pacific focused stop smoking service or an Asian stop smoking service where you only work with people from the Pacific Islands, or alternatively people from China, from Thailand, from Korea, you can use a client who's not Maori but is a culture different from your own. So if you're Chinese and you've worked with a Korean person to help them stop smoking, that is a different culture from your own. So you can use that client if you cannot access a Maori client to describe your work.
Great. So finally, if you've done any of our task tutorials, you know exactly where to find the assessment tasks. So you'll have to go onto our website because that's where we store everything. So we're going to go and have a look at that now. We're going to SSPP. So if you're on full program, this is assessment task 6 and 7. If you're on the health professionals program, this for you is task 2 and 3. So you would click into the full program. We would go down, in this case, to assessment task 6, and we would open up the assessment task, which is sitting right here. Don't forget, you should know it downloads as a Word document. You then have to open that Word document if you work on it, and then you'll be needing to save it to one of your files in order to send it through. So if we look at the actual document itself, remember, first and foremost, what we do is we read the whole of the assessment task so we become familiar with what it's actually asking us to do. Because we don't want you at the end of the time to sort of move into something and then find out that you've done far too much work or you're not answering what is asked of the question.
So with these two assessment tasks, unlike some of the previous ones you've done, you'll have to have verification on your work with the client. So verification is usually a clinical lead or a manager who in the past has seen you work with a client to help them stop smoking, and they can verify that everything that is on the checklist, the verification checklist, that you can do with people you work with. So they don't have to observe you working with this particular client that you're writing about. It can be at any time in the past where your manager or clinical lead has been in the room or watched you or listened to you support someone to stop smoking. So if they've done that once, they can tick all the boxes and say, yes, you do all these things, and verification is done.
And if for any reason you can't get your manager or your clinical lead to verify the work that you've done, what you could also do is ask your client if you could record the session. Just a voice recording would be sufficient, and then you can forward it on to us. We'll be able to listen to that voice recording and we'll be able to tick off all the aspects of the verification that you need. So the good thing about that is that it's pretty straightforward in terms of what's being asked of you with the verification. So as long as you are doing all of these things, it would be probably best to print this out, and then you can go through each area and make sure that you evidence this. So in this case, if the client was referred to a stop smoking service, was the referral handled correctly? So, yes, you'll be able to evidence that by your case notes to say when the referral came in, and then on what date did you ring that client and book your appointment to go and see them. So the great thing about this checklist is that you'll be able to see exactly what's required of you and what you'll need to evidence. So in this case, are you evidencing that, you were displaying rapport building skills during the session? All the way down through. So we'd like to make sure that actually for the purpose of the assessment task, you need to be able to say yes to all of these things. So you need to go through, you need to discuss tobacco dependence, you need to discuss withdrawal symptoms, you need to discuss social support, CO monitor, all of these things. Remember that this is part of your assessment for your assessment task. So in this case, we'll need to see all of this. As your practice grows, you'll be able to understand, and you'll be able to, maybe when you're working with someone, get an understanding of them. And you might not do all of these things every single time, but for your assessment task as part of the SSPP, in this case, you'll need to do everything that's on this list.
Okay. So if you can go back up to the instructions again, Edward.
Sure.
So the other thing that you need to submit along with your completed assessment task and your verification from your manager or clinical lead are your client case notes. So remember that it doesn't have to be a client that you're working with right now. It can be one you've done in the past, a year or so back, six months or so back. And it's just the everyday case notes that you keep when you finish a session with your client. So we need 4 or 5 sets of case notes, your first meeting with your client, and then 4 weeks after the first meeting. So we can have a look at some case notes now.
We can, absolutely. So this is an example of what some case notes might look like.
Going up now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when you submit your case notes from your real clients in task 6 or 7, we don't want you to give us any personal details at all, because that's the breach of the Code of Rights, because you have to complete your, you have to maintain your client's privacy. So any names, addresses, phone numbers, they need to be blacked out before you send these clinical notes to us, these case notes to us. So you can see the client has talked about the referral, or the coach has talked about the referral here, that the ethnicity was Maori, that she was smoking 5 to 7 cigarettes a day within 5 minutes of waking. And all that detail is put down. So here's the referral information that we need, when it was received, when it was acted on. Here's the list of the medicines that were issued and when they were issued, a bit more information on the client there. And then as we scroll down, you'll see the practitioner's notes here from her weekly meetings. So here's a meeting before she made her quit date, before the client set the quit date, and just what the practitioner was talking about, what the client was telling her, any problems that were going on. So you get the picture. This is what we're looking for around 4 or 5 meetings with your client. You might not put as much writing into your case notes as this particular practitioner does, but whatever you do, add them to your assessment task and send them to us when you submit your assessment task.
Right. Well, you know what, and it's very good practice to start to keep good notes and good clinical notes, because if anything should happen, you'll be able to go back, you'll be able to have a look at them. If for any reason you are unwell or sick and one of your colleagues might need to go and visit that client for you, then they'll have all the information right there that you've left for them in the event that you can't actually go. Grant, what are all these red ticks?
Those red ticks, so this is a set of case notes that was submitted for assessing, and our assessors, when they're assessing assessment tasks 6 and 7, they read all the case notes and tick what's gone well and what's been covered really well. And then if there's anything that is a little bit in need of improving or could have been done a little bit differently, the assessors will put comments down there. And we also use the case notes to match the client's realities, how many they smoke, what's going on in the home, is there people smoking around them, what are their triggers to smoking, and we check to see on the assessment task that the practitioner's work matched the realities for that client as described on the case notes.
Right. So, you know, it's all set out here in terms of what you need to supply. So, you know, the client's stop smoking plan, the progress notes, the medicines given. It's fairly straightforward.
And most of those things are nearly always on your case notes.
This is the initial part of the verification, which we've sort of had touched on before. You'll be able to get a good understanding of this when you actually read it for the first time. And this is will be around your notes for the pre-quit when you're building a good relationship with your Maori clients. So all of this often sort of takes place in the information session.
And you can see that the questions here, that remember you're talking about a real person that you've worked with on the job. So you should know all this stuff. So why did that person relapse and go back to smoking? Went to a big party, everyone got drunk, he had 1 cigarette and then he was smoking every day. Well, you're not trying to come up with really long evidence-based answers that are going to impress us with your knowledge of graphs and research. It's just what you said and did with your real client.
So these responses will be based on your client's response. And, you know, knowing that lots of our clients are different, For the case study, you'll be just writing in here what this client does to make excuses for stopping or smoking. Okay?
And as always, if you get confused by any of the questions or you don't quite understand what it's asking, you just contact Edward or myself on the phone or by email, and we'll be more than happy to answer any of the questions and clarify stuff that you need. So here's some questions here about the holistic needs of the person you're helping. So what are the cultural needs of the client? Well, this client is Maori. Maori often require that you pronounce their names correctly, that you have an understanding of tikanga Maori to make them feel culturally safe in your practice. So all of these sort of things is what we're looking for in these sort of answers.
Another example might be, often when you go round to the home to see them, might have other members of their whānau there. So it's probably not a good idea to separate them from their whānau. In fact, what I do is I invite their whānau to sit in, because actually when somebody is stopping smoking, and the more people we have from their whānau to support them on their quit journey, the more likelihood of success we'll have. So, there are some people that might go in and go, well, actually, I'm just here to see Grant. I'll see Grant on my own. But actually, in this case, if there was anyone else in the home, then you might want to invite them as well to be part of the support plan for Grant. So, there's the information on here and what we're asking is pretty straightforward. If you're reading the questions, then chances are you'll, know how to respond accordingly.
So what we're looking at here, so question 18, consider the smoking cessation information and advice that would best help this client and complete the table below. So remember again, you're talking always about your real client. So the advice you gave is a pretend example. We discussed how she was going to do XXX and YYY this week. So that could be with your real client. We discussed how the client was going to not quit this week, but cut down from 20 cigarettes to 15. So that's what you discussed. And how will this work? Well, the client is going to put on a 21 milligram patch to replace the nicotine from those 5 cigarettes they've cut down, and that will keep them safe while they go through that process of cutting down to quit. So stuff like that.
So typically, all of this information is stuff that you will be doing with your client, maybe not all of the time, but most of the time. So we're having a look at best practice. These are the sorts of things that you should be including in your daily practice when you are seeing people.
Let's have a look at number 23 there.
Sure.
So here's an example. So question 23, describe what you, I'm sorry, go one back, 22. This one here. Describe what you said to the client to describe tobacco dependence and withdrawal. So you might say, well, I told the story of the little green monster on the shoulder that screams and screams out for more nicotine, which is a really good answer because clients understand that. You may also go into a bit more depth. You might say something like, when people smoke tobacco, they get a lot of nicotine into their brain, which changes the brain chemistry to upload more nicotinic receptors, and therefore they become more dependent on nicotine. And when they try to quit smoking, withdrawal symptoms present. So what we're looking for is what you explain to your client in terms of what they are going to understand about tobacco dependence and withdrawal. So if you're talking about nicotinic receptors to your client, the assessors might say, well, look, a lot of people might not understand that, or they might get worried that the receptors are something to do with brain damage, or tobacco is causing them brain damage. Nicotine is the bad guy because it's damaged their brain. I'm not putting the patches on. So we might just say, look, that's okay, that's correct, but a better way to do it is to use the little green monster.
Right. There we go. This is, as a good as part of, the work we do, we should be able to explain all stop smoking medicines with our clients so that they can then make a decision on what type of treatment that they would prefer for themselves.
Yeah, so you can see all these questions are just about you and the client, what the client required, what you advised, and what you did, and how the client reacted to that.
Mm-hmm. So really, it's just I think systematically you would just work from the beginning all the way through. You've got all your cues right here in the forms of the questions, so there shouldn't be any reason why you wouldn't be able to evidence what you do to us, for us. But as Grant said, if you get stuck with anything, then you know how to get hold of us. Flick us an email, send us a text, and we will be able to come back to you in a timely manner. And part 3 of the questions for this is the post-quit, so supporting your Maori clients. So all the questions over here on this section pertain to what happened after they'd stopped smoking in that time.
So there you are. So when you run through it like this, you can see that it does look like a lot of work and it's a little bit scary from the front, but actually it's what you do every day, and all you're describing is what you did and said with your real client, and it's quite straightforward once you get on a roll with it.
It is. So of course, as always, you would save this document, you would add your first name and last name and name the document, client's assessment forms, and then you would just email it to nts@inspiring.org.nz. Also, finally, if you have some information on your case notes that you think you'll just be transcribing into some of these question boxes, don't do that. It's going to take a lot of information for you to do that. What you would say in one of these boxes is refer to my case notes or refer to case notes. That way then we'll be able to look at the case notes to find out the information, as opposed to you having to go through your case notes and transcribing the answers into these boxes. Anything else, Grant?
No, I think that's what we need to talk about.
Excellent. So thanks very much for joining us. If you get stuck with anything, don't forget, send us an email, give us a message, and we'll come back to you in a timely manner. So that's task 6 and 7. Great to have you on board. Ka kite ana.
Before you go, what does mitigate mean?
Mitigate means
Watergate.
Watergate. Not quite. Anyway, any gate would do for you. Shut the gate on your way out and don't let it hit you. Bye.
Bye.